For 3,000 years, the galaxy had known only peace. The Great Pax Galactica, signed by every major civilization, ensured that war became nothing more than a distant memory, a cautionary tale told in history lessons. Species that had once been fierce warriors turned to diplomacy, trade, and science. The Galactic Council thrived, and under their watchful guidance, entire star systems flourished without fear of destruction. But peace, as it turned out, was a fragile thing, one that could only last as long as no one dared to test its limits. The Zorixen, a race of proud and ambitious conquerors, had grown restless. To them, the long era of peace was not a sign of progress but of weakness. Their ancestors had once ruled over vast territories through brute strength, but now they were forced to abide by treaties and negotiations. It was an insult to their warrior heritage. Their leaders, driven by a desire to restore their former glory, gathered their fleets and declared war on the entire galaxy. The message was sent to every corner of space, a bold and defiant challenge that struck fear into many civilizations. Empires that had not seen war in thousands of years hesitated, uncertain of how to respond. But on Earth, when humanity received the declaration, they did something no one expected. They laughed. The Zorixen High Command was confused. War declarations had always been met with panic, urgent council meetings, and desperate attempts at diplomacy. But the humans, those supposedly peaceful beings who had played no role in galactic conflicts, treated it like a joke. Some human officials openly chuckled in broadcasts. Others simply shrugged and continued their daily routines as if nothing had happened. To the Zorixen, this was an outrage. Did humanity not understand the gravity of the situation? Did they not fear the might of the Zorixen war fleet? They had amassed thousands of battleships, trained the deadliest soldiers, and prepared weapons that could wipe out entire planets. And yet, their enemies were mocking them. In desperation, the Zorixen sent a direct transmission to the Galactic Council, demanding an explanation. A human representative answered with a smirk and a single sentence: "Are you sure you want this?" What the Zorixen had failed to understand was that humanity had not forgotten war. They had simply chosen to leave it behind. Long before the Pax Galactica was signed, humans had fought wars so terrible that they threatened to wipe out their own species. They had seen destruction on a scale that no alien race could imagine. And when the time came for peace, they embraced it, not because they were weak, but because they understood war better than anyone else. While other civilizations had dismantled their weapons and erased military tactics from their records, humanity had done something different. They had hidden their war machines deep beneath their planets, sealed away their most dangerous technologies, and encoded their strategies into secret archives. The galaxy had mistaken their silence for pacifism. It was a mistake they were about to regret. In the days that followed, the Zorixen fleet moved into position, confident that their campaign would be swift and victorious. They targeted the weaker civilizations first, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Planets that had never known war crumbled under their onslaught, their leaders surrendering before a single shot was fired. The Galactic Council scrambled for a response, pleading with humanity to intervene. But Earth remained eerily quiet. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, filling the galaxy with dread. Then, without warning, humanity acted. It started with a single transmission, broadcasted across every known system. No threats, no declarations, just a simple statement: "The war is over." At first, the Zorixen laughed. To them, it was the ultimate display of arrogance. But then, they saw what was happening. Across the galaxy, long-dormant human warships, hidden for millennia, roared to life. These were not ordinary vessels. They were ancient relics of a time when humanity had fought wars that reshaped entire star systems. Their technology was beyond anything the Zorixen could comprehend: sleek, efficient, and terrifyingly precise. The first Zorixen fleet encountered them near the outer colonies, expecting a battle. What they got was a massacre. The human warships did not fight like any known force. They moved in perfect coordination, striking with such overwhelming force that entire Zorxan squadrons vanished before they could react. Their strongest shields meant nothing. Their heaviest weapons barely scratched the human hulls. In mere hours, what had been an invasion fleet became wreckage drifting in space. Panic spread among the Zorxan ranks. They had believed themselves to be the galaxy's greatest warriors, but now they were facing something far worse than an enemy. They were facing a force that had perfected war to such an extent that it had willingly chosen peace. They tried to retreat, only to find every path blocked. Humanity had predicted every move before it happened, cutting off their escape routes and forcing them into battles they could never win. It was not a war, it was an execution. The Galactic Council, watching in stunned silence, finally understood the meaning behind humanity's laughter. They had never feared the Zorxan. They had simply known that if war ever returned to the galaxy, it would not last long. As the last remnants of the Zorxan fleet crumbled, a final message was sent from Earth to every surviving civilization. It was not a threat, nor a demand for surrender. It was a reminder: we do not seek war, but if you bring it to us, we will end it. And just like that, the war was over before it had even begun. The Zorxan had always believed that war was their birthright. For centuries, they had dominated weaker species, crushing those who dared to resist their rule. The long peace enforced by the Galactic Council had frustrated them, forcing them to sit idly while lesser civilizations prospered. But now, they had finally shattered that peace, and they were ready to reclaim their lost glory. They expected the war to be easy. After all, the galaxy had not seen battle for 3,000 years. Most species had abandoned their military traditions, relying instead on treaties and diplomacy. The Zorxan saw this as an opportunity, a chance to prove their superiority and remind the galaxy who the true rulers were. But there was one thing they had overlooked. In their arrogance, they had forgotten the one species that had once been feared above all others. They had forgotten humanity. The first sign that something was wrong came when their war declaration was met with laughter. It was an insult beyond comprehension. Never in their history had an enemy responded this way. The Zorxan High Command was furious. They expected fear, desperation, maybe even surrender. But laughter, it made no sense. The more they analyzed humanity's response, the more confused they became. Human leaders did not call emergency meetings. Their people did not panic. There were no hurried preparations for battle, no last-minute alliances. Instead, the humans treated the war as if it were nothing more than an amusing joke. Some even placed bets on how long the Zorxan would last. The more the Zorxan studied human history, the more unsettled they became. Official records showed that humanity had played a role in forming the Galactic Council, advocating for peace and unity among the stars. But there were gaps in the records, entire centuries unaccounted for. The oldest archives hinted at something far darker, but the details had been erased, buried beneath layers of classified information. The Zorxan leaders sent spies, desperate to uncover the truth. What they found shook them to their core. Hidden beneath the surface of Earth, in secret vaults that had remained sealed for thousands of years, lay weapons unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were not crude war machines built for brute force. They were something else entirely. Devices so advanced that they defied logic, ships so deadly that even a single one could wipe out an entire armada. But the most terrifying discovery was not the weapons themselves. It was the realization that they had been hidden, not out of fear, but out of choice. Humanity had chosen peace, not because they were weak, but because they had already mastered war to such an extent that they no longer needed to fight. They had seen what war could do, had witnessed the destruction it brought, and had decided to walk away. Not because they were incapable of war, but because they understood it better than anyone else. The Zorxan spies relayed this information to their leaders, who refused to believe it. The idea that humans had once been the deadliest warriors in the galaxy was absurd. If they had truly been so powerful, why had they not used their strength? Why had they remained silent for so long? It was a lie, a trick. The Zorixen would not be fooled. And so they launched their attack, confident that humanity's laughter was nothing more than the bravado of a doomed species. The first battle took place near the outskirts of human-controlled space. The Zorixen fleet, numbering in the thousands, descended upon an isolated human colony, expecting an easy victory. They were wrong. The moment their ships crossed into human space, they vanished. No explosions, no distress signals, just silence. The Zorixen command center tried to make sense of it. Their ships had been there one moment and gone the next. There was no sign of a fight, no indication of what had happened. It was as if the ships had simply ceased to exist. Before they could react, the second attack wave suffered the same fate. The Zorixen sent scout drones, but none returned. Panic began to spread. Then the humans responded, not with an attack, but with a message. You were warned. The Zorixen, now desperate for answers, scrambled to regroup. But it was already too late. Human warships emerged from the void, moving with an eerie precision that defied explanation. They did not fire immediately. Instead, they surrounded the Zorixen fleet, blocking every escape route. The Zorixen commanders, now fully aware of the mistake they had made, attempted to negotiate, but there was no response. Humanity was done talking. The attack was swift and merciless. Human weapons did not merely destroy enemy ships, they erased them, reducing them to nothing before the wreckage could even scatter. The Zorixen had always believed that they were the strongest warriors in the galaxy, but now they saw the truth. They had been children playing at war, while humanity had long since mastered it. The battle was over in minutes. Those who survived did not try to fight back. They ran, fleeing in every direction, hoping to escape the nightmare they had awakened. But there was nowhere to hide. Humanity had planned for every possibility, anticipated every move. No matter where the Zorixen fled, they were met with the same terrifying reality. Humanity had already won. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence. They had always believed that the Pax Galactica had been maintained through mutual respect and diplomacy. Now they understood the truth. The peace had not lasted for 3,000 years because war had been abandoned. It had lasted because humanity had allowed it to last. They had been the silent enforcers, watching from the shadows, ensuring that no one dared to break the peace. And when someone finally did, the response was swift and absolute. The Zorixen, once so proud and fearless, were now a broken race. Their empire crumbled in a matter of days. Those who survived surrendered without hesitation, begging for mercy. And humanity, true to their nature, granted it. They did not conquer. They did not seek revenge. They simply ended the war, then returned to their peaceful existence, as if nothing had happened. The rest of the galaxy, still in shock, asked a single question. Why? Why had humanity hidden their power? Why had they chosen peace when they could have ruled? The answer was simple: because we remember. Humanity remembered what war had done to them. They remembered the destruction, the loss, the endless cycle of violence. They had lived through wars that had nearly wiped them out, and they had vowed never to let it happen again. They did not fear war. They understood it, and that was why they would always win. The galaxy had long forgotten the horrors of war. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had maintained peace, ensuring that no species could threaten the fragile balance that held the stars together. Empires had risen and fallen. Civilizations had flourished and faded, but none had dared to break the sacred peace that had been enforced for so long. But peace is a fragile thing, and when the Drakthul Empire invaded the outer colonies, the illusion of security was shattered in an instant. The Galactic Council was powerless. Their fleets were built for defense, their weapons designed for deterrence, not war. They had no answer to the unstoppable force that swept across the stars, consuming everything in its path. Planet after planet fell, entire species enslaved or exterminated. The Council begged for mercy, But the Drakthal had no interest in diplomacy. They were conquerors, and they would not stop until the galaxy belonged to them. It was in this moment of desperation that the Council turned to the one species they had always feared: humanity. For centuries, humans had lived in isolation, withdrawing from galactic affairs, refusing to take part in politics or war. They had once been one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, but they had vanished from the battlefield, sealing themselves off behind a veil of secrecy. The Council had never questioned this decision. They had been relieved, even grateful, that humanity had chosen silence over dominance. But now, with extinction looming over them, they had no choice. They sent their plea to Earth, hoping, praying, that humanity would answer. What they received in response was a single message: do not interfere. The Council was stunned. Did the humans not understand the threat? Did they not see that the Drakthal would not stop until every world burned? They begged, pleaded, offered anything in return for help, but humanity remained silent. And then, without warning, they vanished. Every human ship, every station, every colony disappeared overnight. No signals, no explanations, just silence. The Council was left in chaos, unsure of what to do. The Drakthal took this as confirmation of humanity's weakness. They laughed at the idea that these so-called warriors had fled in fear. They turned their fleets toward Earth, eager to claim the final prize. But as they approached the Sol system, they discovered something they had not expected. The humans had not fled. They had prepared. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, hidden within the frozen wastelands of Titan, buried beneath the ancient ruins of Luna, the war machines of humanity began to awaken. Machines that had not seen battle for thousands of years, weapons so advanced that even the Drakthal's mighty fleet seemed primitive in comparison. These were not mere ships. They were relics of an age when humanity had ruled the battlefield, before they had chosen peace. Sentient warships, self-repairing dreadnoughts, planet-killer cannons that could tear holes through reality itself. These were the machines that had once brought the galaxy to its knees. And now, they were awakening once more. The Drakthal fleet entered the system with confidence, expecting an easy victory. They had conquered countless worlds, crushed countless enemies. To them, Earth was nothing more than another conquest, another civilization that would kneel before their empire. But as they neared the human homeworld, their scanners went dark. Their communications failed. Their navigation systems shut down. And then, from the depths of space, they saw them. The war machines, black as the void, moving without sound, without warning. They did not rush into battle. They simply waited. The Drakthal hesitated for the first time. They sent a single message, demanding surrender. The humans did not respond. Instead, the war machines activated. The first attack was unlike anything the Drakthal had ever witnessed. Their ships did not explode, did not burn. They simply ceased to exist. The human weapons did not fire projectiles, did not use energy beams or missiles. They erased matter itself, rewriting reality at will. The Drakthal tried to retreat, but space itself betrayed them. Warp drives failed, jump points collapsed. Escape routes vanished. The war machines moved methodically, efficiently, erasing one ship after another, as if wiping away an unwanted stain. It was not a battle. It was extermination. The Drakthal, who had once believed themselves invincible, now faced an enemy they could not comprehend. Their fleets, which had crushed entire civilizations, were torn apart like fragile glass. The war lasted less than an hour. When it was over, nothing remained of the Drakthal armada. Not a single ship, not a single survivor. The war machines, their duty complete, did not celebrate. They did not claim victory. They simply deactivated, returning to their silent slumber beneath the surface of long-forgotten worlds. The galaxy was left in stunned silence. The Council, who had once feared humanity's power, now understood the truth. The reason humanity had chosen peace was not because they were weak. It was because they knew the cost of war. They had seen what their weapons could do. They had lived through wars so terrible that they had chosen to seal away their own strength, to become something greater than conquerors. They had become guardians. And so, the war ended before it had truly begun. The Drakthal were no more. The council, shaken but alive, swore never to let such a war happen again. And humanity simply returned to their silence, as if nothing had happened. But the galaxy would never forget, for deep beneath the surface of long-dead worlds, the ancient war machines still slept, waiting for the day they would be needed again. The Galactic Alliance had long believed itself to be the supreme power of the universe. Its fleets spanned thousands of star systems, its armies were unmatched, and its technology was considered the pinnacle of advancement. For centuries, no empire had dared to challenge its authority. But arrogance breeds complacency, and when the Alliance first encountered humanity, they made a mistake that would change the course of history. They did not see humans as a threat. To them, Earth was a small, insignificant world on the edge of explored space, home to a species that had never participated in galactic politics. The humans had no empire, no vast fleets, no colonies stretching across the stars. They lived in isolation, ignored by the greater powers of the galaxy. And so, when the Alliance demanded humanity's submission, they expected immediate compliance. Instead, they were met with laughter. At first, the Alliance believed it to be a joke. No species had ever dared to defy them before, especially not one as primitive as humanity. Annoyed by what they saw as disrespect, they sent a fleet to Earth's system. A warning, a show of force. 100 warships, each capable of devastating entire planets, arrived in orbit, broadcasting a single demand: surrender or be annihilated. The humans did not respond. The Alliance assumed they were afraid, paralyzed by the sight of such overwhelming power. They gave humanity one final chance to submit. Again, silence. Frustrated, the fleet commander ordered an orbital bombardment. The skies of Earth darkened as the first wave of plasma missiles rained down toward the planet's surface. And then something happened that no one in the Alliance could have predicted. The missiles never reached their targets. Without warning, an invisible force took hold of the weapons mid-flight, freezing them in place as if time itself had stopped. Then, just as suddenly, the missiles reversed course. The Alliance fleet barely had time to react before their own weapons turned against them, ripping through their shields, tearing apart their warships like paper. In seconds, half the fleet was gone. The survivors, panicked and confused, tried to retreat, but their engines refused to respond. Their communications were dead. Their weapon systems failed. And then, from the depths of space, they saw them. Human ships emerging from the void. They were unlike anything the Alliance had ever seen, dark and silent, their movements unnatural, their presence overwhelming. These were not crude vessels of a primitive race. They were something far worse. They were predators. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than 10 minutes. The human ships did not engage in a traditional fight. They did not fire weapons in return. Instead, they dismantled the Alliance fleet with a level of precision that was terrifying to witness. Ships were torn apart from the inside, their crews disappearing without a trace. Some vessels simply vanished, erased from existence. The survivors begged for mercy, but none was given. The Alliance had come to exterminate a weaker species. Instead, they had awoken something that should have been left undisturbed. News of the massacre spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Alliance was shaken, but they refused to accept defeat. They gathered their largest armada, a fleet of over 10,000 warships, the greatest force ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. The mission was clear: wipe humanity from existence. This time, they would not underestimate their enemy. They would strike with everything they had. The fleet set course for Earth, their weapons primed, their minds filled with confidence. But as they approached human space, they realized the truth. They had already lost. The moment the fleet entered the system, reality itself seemed to break. Their ships stopped moving, frozen in place. The stars flickered, shifting unnaturally. Space twisted, folding around them like a living thing. Then, from the darkness, the humans spoke. "You have already been defeated." The Alliance commanders screamed in defiance, ordering their ships to attack, to break free. But it was futile. Their weapons failed. Their shields collapsed. Their ships crumbled into dust, consumed by an unseen force beyond their understanding. The war had never truly begun, and yet it was already over. Across the galaxy, the remaining members of the Alliance watched in horror as their greatest fleet was erased from existence. There was no final battle, no heroic last stand, only silence. The humans did not celebrate. They did not issue demands. They simply vanished once more, retreating into the shadows, leaving the galaxy with a single, chilling realization. The war had never been a war. It had been a lesson. And the lesson was clear. Humanity was not to be challenged. The war had never been a war. It had been a warning. The Galactic Alliance, once the undisputed ruler of the stars, had challenged humanity, believing them to be weak, insignificant, a mere footnote in the grand history of the universe. Instead, they had uncovered a terrifying truth. Humanity was beyond their understanding, beyond their control, beyond anything they had ever faced. The fleets of the Alliance had been shattered, their strongest warships erased as if they had never existed. Their greatest warriors, tacticians, and leaders had disappeared without a trace. Entire systems now lay in ruins, not because humanity had conquered them, but because fear itself had taken hold. The Alliance was crumbling, its member species no longer willing to fight. And yet, humanity did not press forward. They did not invade, did not claim new territories, did not demand surrender. They simply waited, silent, watching, as if giving the galaxy a chance to correct its own mistake. In the aftermath of destruction, the remaining leaders of the Alliance gathered in a desperate attempt to salvage what little power they had left. They were no longer debating how to win, but how to survive. Every proposed strategy ended in the same grim conclusion. There was no victory to be found. Humanity could not be fought. Their technology defied all known laws. Their ships moved through space like phantoms, and their weapons did not destroy but simply erased, as if rewriting reality itself. No species had ever wielded such power. And yet, despite everything, humanity had not declared themselves rulers of the galaxy. They had done something even more terrifying. They had left the galaxy to decide its own fate, as if they were beyond caring about the outcome. It was this silence, this lack of ambition, that haunted the surviving members of the Alliance more than anything else. If humanity had no desire for conquest, then what was it they truly wanted? The answer came in the form of a single transmission, broadcast across every world, every fleet, every surviving outpost of the Alliance. The message was not a demand, not a declaration of victory. It was an invitation, a meeting, a final discussion, on humanity's terms. No location was given. Instead, those willing to negotiate simply found themselves somewhere else, transported instantly, as if by an unseen force. They were no longer aboard their ships or within their war rooms. Instead, they stood within a vast, empty chamber, the walls shimmering with an unnatural glow. Before them stood a single human, dressed in simple clothing, their expression unreadable. There were no guards, no weapons, no displays of power. And yet, every being in that chamber understood the truth. This human was the most powerful entity they had ever encountered. For a long moment, no one spoke. The leaders of the Alliance, once proud and arrogant, now stood in silence, waiting, afraid to make the first move. Finally, the human spoke, their voice calm, emotionless. "You came to us with threats. You sought to conquer. You believed yourselves to be gods. But you have seen the truth. The war is over. And now you will listen." The words sent a shiver through every being present. They were not spoken with anger, nor with hatred. There was no need. The simple fact of humanity's power was enough to render all resistance meaningless. You wish to return to peace, the human continued. And so you shall. But it will be on our terms. The leaders hesitated, unsure of what was being asked. Was humanity going to claim the throne of the galaxy? Would they demand absolute submission? Would they punish those who had stood against them? But as the human continued, the truth became clear. They did not seek dominance. They did not seek vengeance. They sought something far simpler: understanding. You will not challenge us again. You will not seek to control that which you do not understand. The galaxy will move forward, but it will do so without war. If you fail to learn, if you choose to repeat your mistakes, then we will not intervene. We will not destroy you. We will simply leave. The words were met with confusion at first, but then realization set in. Leave. The mere thought of it sent waves of terror through the gathered leaders. Humanity had proven itself to be something beyond mortal comprehension, something that held the fabric of reality itself in its grasp. If they chose to leave, to remove themselves entirely from the galaxy, then the consequences would be unthinkable. The balance of power had already collapsed. Without humanity's presence, without their silent watchful eye, the galaxy would descend into chaos. The Alliance would tear itself apart, its former strength crumbling under the weight of its own arrogance. The peace that had lasted for thousands of years would vanish, and in its place, an age of endless destruction would begin. And so, the choice was clear. One by one, the leaders of the Alliance lowered their heads, accepting the terms given to them. There would be no more war, no more conquests, no more attempts to claim superiority over others. The galaxy would change, not through force, but through fear of what lay beyond the veil of human understanding. It was not submission, it was survival. Humanity did not require a throne, nor did they need to rule. They had already won, not by claiming dominion, but by making it known that they could if they ever wished to. And so, peace returned to the galaxy, not through treaties or negotiations, but through a single, undeniable truth. Humanity had become the guardian of existence itself.